Welcome to the Kiwimana Buzz.
Hi, welcome to the Kiwimana Buzz. It's Gary speaking. This podcast is a small podcast about the 65th anniversary of the Auckland Bee Club that I attended on Saturday. We get to hear Ted Legget and Allan, Holland, who are current members of the Bee Club, discuss a bit of history of the Bee Club. So sit back and enjoy the talks. Thank you. First up, we have Ted Legget.
Now, why should Percy Hillary mean something to us all? Because he was the father of Sir Edmund. And of course Sir Ed was a beekeeper. Initially Percy had a beekeeping business and Ed was a beekeeper in the business. And whether Ed ever came along to the early meetings of the club, we don't know. There's no record. At the time of the 40th anniversary, I wrote to him, but he was out of the country at the time. I asked him if he would come along. He was out of the country and I didn't ever get a reply. But there we are. But Percy was one of the founder members. And they were looking for a place to set up business, and one of them knew the then Minister of Works, Mr. Bob Semple rather. The story goes that they found this site on the south side of what was then Seton High School. I think is now Westlake College. Western Spring College. It was then Seton High School, and it was agreed that they could have that for the peppercorn rent of a halfpenny a year. Halfpenny a year, how about that? And we were there for a long time. It was a beautiful spot. We loved it very much. But as some of you recall from the last time I mentioned it, we had to move in the end because we had a lot of vandalism, hives being vandalised and property being damaged and things like that. If you haven't heard the story, I'll just tell it briefly again. We were thinking of ways to keep the vandals under control. We tried to encourage Dennis to spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week down there, because he was down there a lot of the time. Dennis was in the club when I joined. I can remember ringing Dennis up in my first few months when I had my first hive, and I was worried about the bees, would they survive through the next day? And I rang Dennis up and he gave me a bit of advice. He said, don't worry, they've been around for a few million years and they can probably manage another few million without you worrying too much. Yes, we were there for a while, so Dennis decided he didn't want to spend 24 hours a day down there. So we came up, that was the time of the Cold War and nuclear weapons and all that sort of stuff. And of course, we all know about nukes in the beekeeping business, so we decided that we would arrange what we called our nuclear deterrent. And some of you heard the story before. We had a nuke set up inside one of the sheds with a system of levers and pulleys, so that if anyone, once it was armed, if anyone opened the door, the nuke came tumbling down, out came the bees, and they wouldn't be a very good fettle. And anyone who was around at that time would soon be beating a hasty retreat. Well, we never actually tested it, you see. I mean, these things, you can't go testing nukes all over the place, as you well know. So we never tested it, but we set it up and we were pretty sure it would have worked. But we put a sign on the outside saying, danger, live bees inside. And that worked for quite a while, but after a while, again, we were getting vandalised. And they didn't try and get into the sheds, but they did things like pouring petrol onto the beehives and things like that. It was absolutely appalling. Why some people could do that. So we then decided we'd move, and we found this lovely spot up here. But I thought I'd just read you a brief account. How long have I got, Kim?
You're going
Another half an hour?
You're going well.
This is, some of you probably read this in this handbook. A vivid account of the first field day has been given by Colin Rook, who at that time was the Apicultural Advisory Officer in Auckland. I don't know if Colin is still around, or he's still alive, but Colin said, I attended the first club day with my employer, Ivan Muncaster, who had agreed to give an address. 2 other people were supposed to carry out hive manipulations, while Ivan gave the commentary. Somebody had donated 2 ancient, dilapidated hives. The idea of the demonstration was to show how to transfer each colony into new gear. The two hives were nailed together with strips of wood. Ivan arrived as usual in a cotton shirt with sleeves rolled up and possibly a hat on. The other two people looked like astronauts. They then demonstrated what not to do with bees. Without smoke, and to Ivan's consternation, the two astronauts started to bang the cleats of wood with hammers and literally tore the hives apart. Ivan's arms were covered with bees and stings. He was wiping them off like grapes, pretending that they didn't hurt as he continued his commentary. Before long, the audience panicked and fled. I was among the early starters, knowing full well what was about to eventuate. It was a shambles and a disaster. Ivan resigned immediately. Mr. Lodge, who was then a boy of 13, who also attended the first field day, recalls that he, wisely, watched the proceedings from the top of the bank on the bank of the stream down there, and so he had a head start when the rush started. The club must have done well to have retained his interest in bees after such an episode. So that was quite an auspicious beginning to the club's history. But we've come a long way since then, and we've moved up to this wonderful setting here. I don't think we have too many problems with vandalism or anything like that now. It's just a splendid setting, and of course we've got these beautiful facilities here. And it's wonderful to see the club in such great shape. I don't come along very much now. I come along once a year for the occasional field day. But it's good to see people like Dennis and Allan, who've been stalwarts for so long, and to see that beekeeping is becoming ever more popular. And I was just talking to a couple of people telling me about young people who are getting involved, so that's very encouraging. So great to be here, and hope to be with you for the 100th anniversary.
Second, we have Allan Holland.
Kim asked me as an old member of the Bee Club to say a few words about the beginnings of the Auckland Bee Club, but I've actually only been here 20 years, and the Bee Club's been going for 65, so I really don't know a lot about the early stages. So I thought what I would do is perhaps tell you how bees came to me. I used to work for the post office, and in those days, when you turned 50, the post office wrote to you and said, in 10 years you're going to retire, so you should start planning it now. So being a good civil servant and having an interested wife, we both sat down and decided to start planning our retirement. So I'd been doing a bit of strategic planning at that stage in the post office, so I started my strategic plan of retirement. And so I started off with an overarching statement for the whole strategic plan, and our overarching statement was to have a townhouse, a country estate, and a villa in Spain. If you're going to dream, you might as well dream big. So that was the start of it. We went through the strategic procedure of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, how much money we're going to have, how much money we're going to need, what we were going to do. Where were we going to retire? We had noticed that our parents had suffered every winter, so the old people don't like the cold weather. So we decided what we would do is spend 6 months in New Zealand, summer, and 6 months in Spain, summer. So we would live in permanent summer. So all of our aims in our plan was to achieve that end. Now, we had done our economics and costs of retiring, and we found that we were $5,000 short. And $5,000 in those days was a return trip to Spain. So I started looking for some way to make $5,000 a year for the 6 months I was in New Zealand, and bees came up. So I attended to find out about bees. First thing I did was attend adult education course in Wellington. And while I was at that was 1 hour a week, went on for so many weeks. And while that was on, I went and started reading every book in the Wellington Library on bees. At the end of the course, the adult education course, they enabled us to buy a nuke. So I started with one nuke, would be about 283, I think. And so the bees started teaching me. How I came to Auckland was that we looked around where were we going to live in New Zealand, and 3 places came up: Nelson, Gisborne and Auckland. And the wife decided Auckland it was going to be, because at that stage in our life we had 5 children and there was not one residing in New Zealand at the time we were writing this plan. She said if she was going to see her grandchildren, she would have to be near the international airport. So that's how we came to Auckland. So as soon as we started looking for land, every opportunity we got, school holidays, because my wife was a teacher, we would come up to Auckland and look for land. In 1988 I managed to find 5 acres at KM002, nice and flat, and shelter belts all around it. I thought that was good, so we bought that, and so we retired. I joined the Bee Club in Wellington at 2, and one of the great stalwarts there, Frank Lindsay, a lot of you will have met Frank Lindsay. He is perfectly knowledgeable on bees, and I learned so much from him. Incidentally, some people have had trouble with wasps recently. I've heard people asking at the club about wasps. Well, one of the first problems I had was wasps. And it wasn't long before I was hunting the neighbourhood and killing wasp nests. And, once you start doing that, you become very expert at it. Before long, I could look in the sky and tell the difference between wasps and bees as they flew past. You learn just by watching. As soon as we moved to Auckland, I started building the house, the retirement house, and one of the things that I had done the Christmas before was to buy a 2-car garage for removal from Onehunga and moved it out to KM002 and re-erected it at KM002. So I already had experience about moving buildings. I'd learnt a lot in doing that, and in fact our lounge was the 2-car garage. While we were building the house, we slept in a small caravan. By then I had 4 hives, which I moved from Wellington to KM002 and placed it on KM002. And while I was busy building the house, they were busy starving. I lost 4 of them the first year I was in KM002 from starvation. So what I learned from that was, in fact, KM002 had no rubbish around. The land value out there was so high that people just didn't waste it with rubbish. It was all in production, so that there was just no food about in the rural areas. That I had left them with a full box of honey, but they'd eaten that and starved. So I had to start collecting swarms to begin again. It would be 93, 94 when I joined the Auckland Bee Club, and as Ted said, we domiciled behind the zoo, and it was a very nice place and very nice people there, the members of the Bee Club. As he mentioned, we began to get attacked by vandals, and so had to look around for somewhere new to locate our building. And I think Jill Dano at that stage had some knowledge of people at Unitec and managed to mission to relocate our building onto the Unitec property. I can remember at that stage I wrote a submission about how beneficial it would be for Unitec to have us here. And I remember I drafted a letter for Jill to sign to ask for our permission, and it would be 96 we got permission. It would be the end of 94. So I got the job of organising the move. Well, I just prepared a list of people who and allocated them to particular areas of work, a detailed point by point, 1, 2, 3, 1A, 2A, 3A, how to do it and who was to do what. And I remember somewhere here it says that an action that has got a lower number has to be done first, and the people who are doing an action with a higher number must go and help the people with the lower number to get that finished before that. But anyway, we managed to do that in one day. It was quite an achievement, and we also not only did we move the one-car garage, but we put the lean-to up at the same time. One thing I'd like to do is read the names of the people who were involved, just in case some of you know some of them. I've got the transport leader was Ian McPherson, Doug Browning and wife, Jill Daynell, Warren Pitcher, Bob Long, Warren Cook, Warren Dalgeesh, Ian Fielding, Eric Dimmick was removal leader, Graham Jebb, Mike Cooker, Ian Anderson, Ivan Rosanovich, Terry Buckley, Richard, the site leader was Richard Danderoff, Dennis Waite was at the site here, Walter Crescenzo, Chris Massey and Colin Bell. A lot of these people are dead now, but they're the people who moved that building in one day. In 1998, we moved in 96, 1998 was our 50th year, so we bought a tree and stuck that in, got permission for it, and formed a memorial garden, which is behind the beehives. That rockery was our memorial garden. So I noticed that it's in a pretty beaten up condition at the moment, so it would be nice if one of our club days we could pull a few of the weeds to clean up that memorial garden, because that was our 50 years memorial garden. I've probably talked enough for now. I have a little bit more here, but it's more to do with Baroa than anything else. So I'll
make your money to go to Spain.
Again?
You can make your money to go to Spain.
One of the things that in our strategic plan was we did not expect to get the national super. However, we thought that our government superannuation would prevent us from getting the national super. But they never stopped it, so we actually had enough money to do what we wanted to do without actually having to make money, which we never did anyway. They have simply, to me, become pets, and I don't consider them as making money or they are friends. And I have a number of hives at Kiwimana. See them every day and talk to them. Thank you.